So, if it's your first time playing Football Manager, you're probably wondering how to set everything up and what you should do. You can play the game using just the vanilla game from the very beginning. You can do it. I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but I will tell you that if you play with certain add-ons, you're going to discover that the vanilla game itself might not quite be enough for you. So I'm going to introduce you to 3 different add-ons that I try to use, and I'm probably going to end up using for every single save that I do from here on out. We'll just jump right into this. The first one is what I consider to be one of the more essential add-ons no matter how you play the game. You want to go over to Sorted Out SI. I'll have links to everything down below in the description. Go over to Sorted Out SI and you want to get the FM 2024 licensing and real name fix. What this does is it allows the real names of certain people in the game who were not put in the game for various reasons, as well as the real names of teams like Manchester United, Juventus, and so on and so forth. It's important to have this set up. You can also have the German national team, imagine that. It's important to have this set up because it's going to make your game a lot more meaningful if Juventus are called Juventus and not Zebra, like they're called in the base game. Now, it's possible that the base game doesn't bother you that much. It's fine, right? If you want to play with things the way that they are in the base game, go right ahead. It's perfectly okay. But when you realize that it's easy to install this, it doesn't cost anything, and it takes a couple seconds to set up, you'll wonder why in the world you would want to do anything else. The only trick to it is that you will have to, no matter whether you're on PC, Mac, or Linux, you'll have to go into your database and then DB folder and remove certain folders and then copy in folders that you download from this file. That's about it. You can even do this, by the way, if you're on the Steam Deck and if you're on Xbox and if you're doing a whole bunch of other things. The instructions here are pretty easy to follow and pretty simple to read and understand. Now, there are 9 different editor data files that you will also need to load up in your saved game when you start it up, just so that you're aware. But if you go along with this and give it a try, I think you'll find that it definitely is worthwhile. Now, moving on to number 2, we want to go back to our good old friend, the World Super League. The World Super League by Darth Furion here on FM Scout is, in my opinion, the best of the created editor data files. This one is just absolutely incredible. This one allows you to do all sorts of things. It allows for the entire world to be in a certain specific, one type of league structure. It provides much more challenge than does anything else, and it's much more rewarding. So if you're used to playing Football Manager and you're starting off in Iceland and you go up and you start winning the league year after year and you win all of the domestic competitions and then you slowly build yourself up in the Champions League and it's a real grind, if you want something different, you need to go to something like this, right? You will have to grind through, especially if you start at the very bottom. But it's a much more rewarding grind because no matter which country your team is in, you can always reach the top, and you will always have a challenge as you get up there. The current version here has 12,000 teams, all sorts of different competitions to play in, tons of cups, including for youth teams, and all sorts of other odds and ends that are added on. Now, Darth Furion, when he created this, also created a number of other fixes and add-ons to go along with it that I always use. There's one to allow all players to have additional current ability and additional potential ability. Staff have better current and potential ability to help sort of balance out things so that you don't have certain teams that just dominate everything from the get-go. There's rebalancing of nation youth ratings, which will help with developing Wonder Kids. There are also rebalanced transfer values, which are really important when you're using this database. It's important because the transfer values start going a little bit haywire otherwise, especially since teams start having a whole lot more money. So you need it to be a little bit rebalanced. Everything on the high end will go up, which is helpful if you happen to have a Wonder Kid that other teams want. Training facilities are also rebalanced so that they are equal among countries. As it currently stands in Football Manager, everything is set up to work the way it does in its own individual country. Youth recruitment is also rebalanced. Youth coaching, youth facilities are rebalanced, and then all club reputation is increased by 1,000 points, which helps also a lot in terms of good creation of young players. There's a whole ton of countries and clubs included. I won't go over all of this, but you have everything from 49 teams in Argentina included, 1 team in Cameroon. You'll find 5 teams from Finland. We're talking about Iceland. You have 3 teams from there as well. There are some nations that are sanctioned, so Iran doesn't have any teams. Unfortunately, my favorite, North Korea, is not represented, but we can always play with Kazakhstan, which is pretty close, and so on and so forth. There's all sorts of cool stuff there. Again, 1,200 teams, all sorts of stuff to play around with. And then there is this famous 96 League Premier League setup, which is something that you can watch on the other videos on my channel. As you have a huge league to deal with, different divisions, and you have to play well the entire season around. There's none of this letting a couple matches go by and then fixing it up in the end, making up for it at the very end of the season. So that's the World Super League. The last patch, editor data file, I strongly recommend is this one from the Sports Interactive forums. This is Dave INCID's Increased Realism Mega Pack. And for me, really, no matter how you play the game, this is the pack that is probably the most essential. Now, when we're talking about World Super League, there are certain things included here that contradict what Dave INCID has done. This by Dave INCID is essential if you want an actual realistic type of game. We'll go through these one at a time, right? So alternative youth rating is something that we saw before, as well as some changes to game importance and other things to try to allow teams to come up with players that are a little bit more competitive, right? Basically, the global distribution of talent was slightly increased, and there's a little bit better selection of development criteria for each nation. There are fixes to club data, which is not necessarily that important, but it might be helpful, especially nicknames of clubs, the names of the coordinates of cities, different stadiums, colors, and so on. There are fixes here to the finances of certain clubs. This is what he's talking about here is specific to Germany. That itself is probably going to contradict with World Super League. You probably don't want to put that in. Another big thing, geographics and languages. This is where you have a whole lot of edited cities, local regions added in, as well as a whole bunch of languages. Now, there are earlier patches and earlier versions of Football Manager that contain a lot of this data. My understanding is that this is an improvement upon this and an update on it, and I know that Dave INCID works on this every year. There are realistic injuries. This is what I do play with. I'm not sure if you want to do this or not. This will make your game a little bit harder, especially since the intensive counter-press tactics are going to be less effective if you use this. There are changes here to salaries, market values, and so on. Again, you don't want the salary changes in if you're using World Super League. And sponsorships also with World Super League are already fixed. There are adjustments to staff attributes, which is also up in World Super League. Change transfer preferences for Realism, especially when it comes to country-to-country transfer preferences, which you might want to use, you might not. Again, if you're doing it the way I do, you probably don't care so much about that. Now, this is a big thing, which is the changes to the weather, which means that the weather will be higher than the weather put in by default. As well, I believe there's also an increase in the chance of rain and also very cold weather in certain parts of the world. Whereas if you play like I have over in Yenji, China, with the base game, you're not going to see temperatures as cold as you should. There's a lot of stuff here about adjustments into how you gain nationality in a whole bunch of countries. That's a difficult thing, and this is something that probably not so important for World Super League, where there's no worry about nationality. But if you're playing with the base game or any other add-ons, you're going to have to worry about that. Fixes to worldwide awards. There are fixes to derbies. This worldwide award fix, by the way, is set up so that you won't be able to stockpile youngsters as easily now, because other clubs will put a lot of value on them because they can win awards, and it helps their reputation. There are agreements between nations, changes to national team attendance so that it's not higher than it should be, changes to national team reputation, changes to youth and training facilities, which is similar to World Super League. There are also adjustments to current ability, potential ability, and some new Wonder Kids and some other things. So there is a huge, huge number of changes there, as you can imagine. Changes to club transfer preferences, changes to league reputation, ticket price changes, especially from in Asia, and a lot of other performance improvements and other things. And this, as I've said, is probably the most essential of the patches for Football Manager. This is the one that I would recommend to anybody, no matter how you want to play, because of how much it can change your game. Now, look, the base game of Football Manager is not a problem. It's not a worry. It's good and it works quite well. But if you really want to have a challenge and if you really want to have a lot of fun with the game, I'd really recommend looking into some of these changes. I mean, some of this stuff is quite interesting and it's a lot of fun to play around with. So if I were you, I'd recommend at least taking a look at it and see what you can come up with. That's it for me today. I'll talk with you tomorrow. Bye-bye.